Good evening, everybody. Before this meeting is called to order, we would like to sworn in the new re-elected board members, Mr. Capello, Mr. Anderson, and Mr. Ken. Please read the required oath for school board members, stating your name, and you can find that in the shared drive.
Tamara, should we do this all together like we usually do, or?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, guys, you ready?
Yes. All right.
1, 2, 3. I, Dino
I,
Capello,
Michael Anderson, do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will
that I will
support
support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution
of
of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will
bear true faith
and
and
allegiance
and
to the
allegiance to the same
and
and to the government established
in
in the United States
and this state
and this state under the authority
of the people.
of the people.
So help me
So
God.
help me God.
Thank you, guys. Congratulations. Your convenience, you can sign the oath, and you can scan it or drop it off at the office anytime this week.
Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
We'll continue with the organization meeting. I'll call this meeting to order at 7:06. I'll put this down. This meeting of the Denville Township Board of Education is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Due to the state of emergency declared by the government of the state of New Jersey and the United States regarding COVID-19, this board meeting is being held via video conference and in person. Electronic and regular notice of this meeting was provided to the Daily Record and on the Star Ledger of Morris County, has been delivered to the township clerk, has been posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education office and at each of the school buildings in the district. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United
of the United
States
States of America
and to the
and to the republic
and
for which it stands,
one
One nation,
one nation,
God,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty,
with liberty
and justice
and justice for all.
for all.
Our roll call. Mr. Kim,
Here.
Mr. Cass,
Here.
Mr. Capello,
Here,
Mr. Anderson,
Here.
Mr. Lure,
Here.
Mrs. Gould,
Here.
Mrs. Wagner.
Here.
Thank you. I'll read the result of the annual school elections held November 3rd, 2020. Mr. Capello received 7,331 votes. Mr. Kim, 6,736 votes. Mr. Anderson, 576 votes. Congratulations to the re-elected board members. At this time, I will ask for nomination for school board president.
Damaris, I would like to nominate Laura Wagner as president.
I'll second.
Thank you. I'll roll call. When I roll call, please mention yes or no for Mrs. Wagner as board president. Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Sure.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Wagner, you can take over the meeting at this point.
Okay. I would like to say thank you, first of all, to everyone, and to ask for nominations for vice president. And I would like to nominate Dino Capello.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Are there any other nominations? Okay, roll call, please.
When I roll call, please say yes or no for the nomination for vice president. Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes. Okay, so now we are at the committees section of the reorg meeting. If everyone could send me an email, I think that I've discussed with some of you how I'd like to keep us in our current committee assignments unless you feel strongly about moving. So if we could table that vote, Damaris, we can do that, right?
Yes.
So we're just going to table that vote. And then if everybody could send me an email, if you feel like you'd like to be moved to a different committee, please indicate which committee you're interested in, and we will vote on them and approve them at the next meeting. Now it is, I have 7-11. Is that what you have, Tamara?
That is correct.
Okay, so at 7-11, meeting is open for public comments. If you have something that if you'd like to address the board, please type your full name in the chat and you will be acknowledged. Cindy, do we have any members of the public? Oh, well, I know we have at least Mrs. Anderson.
Yes, Mrs. Anderson's there, and you just have a congratulations from Mrs. Anderson and from me to the board members who were sworn in. That's currently all that's in there.
Okay. Yes, congratulations to the three of you. And now we move on. Oh, so we have to close, the public session at 7:12. And we move on to appointments. Mr. Capello, would you please move us through the appointments?
Sure, I'd be happy to. If there are no objection, I would move under appointments, items 1 through, it just keeps going, doesn't it? Hold on one second, bear with me.
21, I believe.
Thank you. My fingers are not cooperating tonight. Yes, 1 through 21 under appointments. These appointments obviously encompass many of the business functions and operation functions that the board and the district provide and are provided during the year, including auditors. We also have our insurance agents, attorneys, board attorneys, attorneys for different functions. We also have disclosure agents for our advising for bonds and things like that. We have the appointment for personnel for System 3000 system, E-rating consultant. We also have statutory appointments that you can see on number 10. It continues. We have our tax shelter annuity company, health benefits domestic partnership under Chapter 256. Anyway, the list continues. So I'd like to move all of these items.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. to Mr. Capello and Mr. Kim, if we could table item number 3 under A for the time being, until later on.
Yep, I have no objection to that.
I have no objection as well.
Does anybody have any questions or anything they wanted to mention? Okay. Now, do we need some type of new reading, or are you okay with the amendment as is?
I'm okay the way it is.
Okay. So roll call, please.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes. Okay.
We have one more item to vote on, Mrs. Wagner, under B, adoption of public meetings calendar.
Thank you very much. Yes. So can I have a motion to adopt the public meetings calendar?
I'll make the motion, Laura. It's Mike.
I second.
Is that James?
No, Dave.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
second.
Anybody have any questions or comments about the calendar? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes. Do we need to have a second open public session?
In the regular work session we go.
Okay, so we don't need to have one now. Okay, so under good of the cause.
We do have one in here too as well, later on after the good of the cause.
Oh, it's on the next page. Sorry.
Page 8.
Sure.
I don't know if anybody has anything they want to say now. We're obviously going to go to our regular meeting when this one is finished.
Do we have to read the code of ethics as well?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
I think last year, did we round robin this one? Did I think everybody take one and we read it?
I think we did.
I believe last year everybody took a paragraph and read it. You guys just took turn and sign off and gave it back to me. Today you can sign off and scan it or drop it off or mail it to me, however is convenient for you.
So do you need us to read it now for the record, Damaris?
We need to read the code of ethics, yes.
Okay. So does everybody have it open? We can just go around.
I strongly suspect it would be better to just have one person read through it because it will save us a lot of time. I will be happy to do that if everyone else is okay with that.
It's a great idea.
I second
Yep. Sounds good.
Very kind of you. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome. Shall I go ahead, Damaris?
Yes, please.
Okay. Code of Ethics for School Board Member. NJSA 18A 12-24.1. A school board member shall abide by the following code of ethics for school board members. A. I will uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes shall be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures. B. I will make decisions in terms of educational welfare of children and will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing. C. I will confine my board action to policymaking, planning, and appraisal, and I will help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them. D, I will carry out my responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with my fellow board members to see that they are well run. E, I will recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education and will make no personal promises nor take any private action that may compromise the board. F, I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interests or partisan political groups or to use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends. G, I will hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools which, if disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all other manners, I will provide accurate information and, in concert with my fellow board members, interpret to the staff the aspirations of the community for its school. H, I will vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the Chief Administrative Officer. I will support and protect school personnel in proper performance of their duties. J, I will refer all complaints to the Chief Administrative Officer and will act on the complaints at public meetings only after the failure of an administrative solution.
Thank you. At your convenience, you can sign the oath of ethics and send it to me when you have a chance.
Damaris, just to confirm, that's everybody, not just the
Everybody.
reinstated. Okay, thanks.
Mhm. Mrs. Wagner, you are muted.
Sorry about that. Can you accept a electronically signed one, or would you prefer hand signed?
Electronically is perfectly okay as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so at 7:21, we are going to open for our second public comment section. If anyone out there would like to address the board, please just type your name in the comments. We will acknowledge you. Cindy, we still don't have anybody but you and Mrs. Anderson. Sorry.
That's correct.
Okay. So then I'm going to close the public comment section at 7:22. We are not going to go into executive now. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Lohr. Mr. Kim, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, meeting is adjourned at 7:22. We're staying on this link, right?
It is the same link.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll stop the recording now because you're going into executive session, correct?
No, we're not going to.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet? Okay.
We're going to go directly into the work session.
Okay, so it is 7:22. I call this meeting to order. This meeting of the Denville Township Board of Education is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act due to the state of emergency declared by the governments of the state of New Jersey and the United States regarding COVID-19. This board meeting is being held via video conference. Electronic and regular notice of this meeting was provided to the Daily Record and/or Star Ledger of Morris County, has been delivered to the township clerk, has been posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education office and at each of the school buildings in the district. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Here.
Mr. Capello?
We lost Mr. Capello.
Mr. Capello?
I think we lost him.
I'll go back to him. Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Lohr?
Present.
Mrs. Gould?
Here.
Mrs. Wagner?
Here.
Mr. Capello?
Sorry, I dropped out. Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay, if we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we do not have any special presentations tonight. Dr. Forte, superintendent's comments. Cindy, do we have Dr. Forte?
Steve, you're muted.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry about that. We are working on Valley View Athletics still. It looks like we'll have a plan in place for coaches for the 2 basketball teams for January 25th. Some other towns are interested in doing it, so it looks like we'll have a shortened season that will start in early February. Just a reminder to the Operations Finance Committee, we have a call with Dr. Grip on January 7th. It's in your calendar. And our numbers in town are starting to level off a little bit. I'm not sure if you guys have got a chance to look at it, but over the weekend, the long weekend, it would be a 4-day weekend actually, went from 573 to 589. So hopefully we're the northwest part of our state is also looking a little bit better. So hopefully we're starting to get to a little bit of a leveling off, and this plan of keeping our schools virtual for the 6 days will help keep everybody safe. Our schools are planning to open up again on January 12th, and we do have some special education classes coming back this Thursday. And these are all tentative plans, and if there's not any big changes or anything else drastic that happens. And that's it for the superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Dr. Forte. Dr. Cullis, Assistant Superintendent's comments.
So happy New Year, everyone. A reminder that January 13th is now a half-day morning session only because our staff will be participating in the 3rd of our series of workshops, and this one will be on culturally responsive teaching. We will have another half-day on February 11th, which is on representing all students in the curriculum, approaching race and equity in the classroom, and that will complete the series of 4. We also are participating in a series of virtual assemblies, January through April, that's sponsored by the Denville Municipal Alliance Committee. And our first one is January 19th through 26th, so sometime during that week. Students in kindergarten through 5th grade will be getting links to the virtual assembly, and it's by Mark Griffiths, which is international ventriloquist, and the focus is called The Gold in You. So it's a focus on self-esteem and bullying in January. We are working on a Black History Month poster contest that will be sponsored by Denville Voices Against Racial Injustice, as well as some local businesses. So more details will come, but we're just finalizing exactly the parameters of the contest and the theme, and then we'll be sending that out hopefully by January 15th. What will be expected, kindergarten through 8th grade for the contest. There are prizes, and all of the finished pieces will be displayed at a local business. A reminder that we are in the process, or we're starting the process of 8th grade recommendations and scheduling for the high school. And parents will be able to see their recommendations for their students, their children, on January 14th. So in Genesis, you'll be able to go on and see what courses your child is recommended for. And then conferences, individual conferences with the guidance counselors will begin on January 19th. And this concludes Assistant Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Cullis. Mrs. Gorowski, Business Administrator's report.
Just a reminder that all re-elected board members, as well as second-term board members, need to attend the required training with the School Board Association. Please email me, let me know which training you're interested in taking, and I'll register you. If you're not sure, I'll email you the required trainings that you should be taking this coming year. Thank you.
Damaris, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Will the third year course still?
Yes.
New and second year, but there's still a third year one, right?
You need to take one more this year.
Okay.
And I'll email it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Hey, Laura, can I quickly
Yeah, go ahead.
ask a question or comment? Hey, Dr. Collis brought up January 13th. Just a suggestion. I mean, even as a board member, I didn't have it in my calendar. I looked at my phone. I know that was a change, and I know it was buried in a lot of messages we sent out, and it's been put out there, but we may want to think about sending a separate communication just for that, because like I said, I didn't have it in there, and I know it's, if you click on the wrong link on our website, you could actually pull up the static calendar from the beginning of the year that didn't have it there. So I don't want people to be confused, that's all.
Not a bad idea, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll handle that.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, so it is 7:30 and we are going to open up for our first public comment section of this meeting. If you would like to address the board, please type something in the chat and we will acknowledge you.
It's just us.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to close the public comment section at 7:30 and move on with the agenda. Onto old business with no action to be taken. Mr. Capella, would you move us through that, please?
Sure, certainly. So at the next meeting, I or someone else will be moving for approval under old business items A, B, and C. They include the reports from December 20 of the Treasurer of School Monies and the Board Secretary report, also education reports of student enrollment, the report of the Health Office, and the 2021-22 holiday calendar. We also will be looking at and approving the minutes for our work and regular session from December 14th and our special meeting on December 21st.
Thank you, Mr. Capella. And now to review old business where there is action to be taken. Mr. Cass, would you mind moving us through that, please?
Sure. And Mr. Cass, right?
Yes, Don, thank you.
So making sure. You sound a little tinny coming through the phone here. At the next meeting, I or somebody else will ask the board to approve the education under education reports, the 2021-2022 district school calendar.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cass, these are action items.
Okay. I'll ask the board to.
Don, is it possible that you're muted?
Yeah, we asked the board, item number 4, education reports to approve the district school calendar for the 2021-2022 school year.
I'll second.
Questions, comments?
I have a question. It says the paragraph under number 4, it actually says January 2021 monthly financial report.
Yes.
Am I reading? Are we approving that as well for this this vote?
No, we're not approving the transfer. That's the transfer. That's documenting that we do not have any consultation. We're not approving the reports now. No. We only approve the school calendar.
We're just voting on the calendar. Mr. Kim, I have the same on my printout.
Yeah.
So
That paragraph should not have been in there. It should have been only the school district calendar on the reports.
Okay, so we're going to strike that paragraph, and the only thing we're voting on is the district calendar. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for pointing out, Mr. Kim.
My brain is still in vacation mode, so I thought I couldn't read that paragraph for some reason. I was missing something. Like, it's out of place.
Damaris, do you need Don and I to accept that change?
Please, yes.
Okay. Paragraph number 4 that we'll be voting on, it's just on the education reports, approving the district school calendar for the 2021-2022 school year. The preceding second paragraph is to be stricken from the agenda.
And I agree to that change.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments about the 21-22 calendar?
I assume this matches up fairly closely with the Hills Regional District's calendar.
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments or questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mr. Cass, Mr. Cass? We lost him. Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Lure?
Yes.
Mrs. Gould?
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner?
Yes.
I'll go back to Mr. Cass. He probably dropped. We'll go back to him.
Okay. On to new business action to be taken. Mr. Anderson, would you please move us through personnel?
I'd be happy to. If there are no objections, I'd like to move on the agenda under item 5, subsection A, items 1 and 2, which include personnel items, including several substitutes in our agenda, as well as the approval of an employee action on number 2.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you. I heard Mr. Cass, actually. Damaris, before we move on to this vote, do you want to, or do you want to?
Mr. Cass, how do you vote on item number 1 for the district school calendar?
Yes.
Thank you.
So under personnel, are there questions or comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so roll call, please.
Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes on item number 1, abstain on item number 2.
Mr. Lure?
Yes on both.
Mrs. Gould?
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner?
Yes. Okay, and on to instruction and programming. Mrs. Gould, would you move us through that section, please?
Yes, if there are no objections, I'd like to move for item 1 to be approved. This is to approve the school day schedules, the regular day schedule, a 2-hour delay schedule, an early dismissal schedule for Valley View, Lakeview, and Riverview.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Questions or comments?
Is these schedules aren't different from what we're currently doing, correct?
That's correct. Same schedules.
Okay, I don't recall us approving the schedules at the beginning of last year. Is this something that we have forgotten to do in the past, or is there something else going on that I missed out on?
It was something that came up through CUSAC, so we put it on this agenda for in perpetuity.
Okay, so this would be something every first meeting in January we'll be approving it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Kim? Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Can you not hear me?
Did I hear yes?
Yes.
Mr. Capelli?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Lure?
Yes.
Mrs. Gould?
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner?
Yes. Okay, under finance, Mr. Kim, would you mind moving us through finance, please?
Sure. I motion that we approve under section 5, letter C, that we accept the 2019-2020 comprehensive annual financial audit report, which had no recommendations, and the auditor's management report on the administrative findings for the year ending June 30th, 2020.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Cass. Damaris, we haven't voted on this yet, is that correct?
We have not voted on the CAFR because the pension numbers were not available. They were available in December and the audit was updated. There was no change to the audit, but we needed to wait for the numbers to come in.
Thank you.
Sure.
Congratulations on an audit with recommendations to you and your staff.
Thank you.
I was absent during the meeting for the review of the audit. Will you be handing out, or have you already handed out, hard copies of this audit?
The CAFR is on the share drive, and I do have a physical audit book as well in my office,
Okay.
which I will be handing out next time.
Okay, so each board member will get one, or
Only if they
okay,
do have an electronic copy on the share drive.
got it. I don't remember if hard copies have been handed out in the past. Am I confusing this with other documents then?
No, we are.
Apparently, it's something we can't have them not do. Right? Because I think we've asked this question because honestly, I'm going to eventually build a coffee table out of the ones I have.
We
I don't
do
really
not.
have-
If you guys don't want it, I do not have to request that from the auditor.
That would be awesome. I mean, personally, I see no reason to have one.
Okay, so we'll do it electronically
Save it
going
for us.
forward. Unless if anybody wants a copy, I will get a copy.
Yeah, this is James. I would request a hard copy, please.
I would also request a hard copy. This is Dave.
Okay. Dave and Kim.
I know it makes me sound like a Luddite, but I slogged through that thing online and I read much better when it's paper in hand.
I agree.
Laura, can I just make a quick comment that just to tap onto your thanks and congratulations to Damaris and the entire business office. I think we've gotten used to having an audit with no recommendations. And that's a great thing, but that is due to a lot of hard work from Damaris and the entire business team. So thank you for everything you do, because it's become standard in this district to basically have no recommendations or very small recommendations. And that's solely due to you and your team. So thank you.
Thank you.
I concur. We're spoiled.
Here, here.
Well, I was just talking to Cindy about the feedback we're getting. If everybody mutes and just unmute when you're talking only, I think it'll help that feedback.
Okay. We're going to move on to new business with no action to be taken.
Mrs. Wagner, we need to roll call first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
If there's no other comments, we'll move on to roll call, please.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mr. Cass, Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Cass. We'll jump Mr. Cass.
Okay, we'll get him back. So now we're going to move on to new business with no action to be taken. Under personnel, Mr. Anderson, would you mind moving us through that, please?
Sure. Myself or someone at the next meeting will move item under 6A. There are 1 through 7. They include a position for a music director, as well as agreement with CJ Pride that we've, I think, discussed a few times already, as far as building some additional staff members through their program, as well as several other administrative actions for employees.
Oh, we don't need a second. Sorry. And moving on to IMP for
Laura, can I just ask a quick question? I know we talked a little bit about CJ Pride, Steve, at the personnel meeting, and I know you mentioned at the last meeting, I believe we left it that you were going to talk to some other superintendents or some other districts that were included in that program. So I know you said that the feedback seemed to be pretty good, obviously, since you put it on here, but can you give us a little more color as to the feedback you got from other districts that were in that program?
Yeah, I have 2 colleagues that I was pretty familiar with over the years. The superintendent of Watchung Hills Regional and the superintendent of Glen Ridge Public Schools. I got in touch with both of them, and both of them had positive things to say. Both said that it is helping. It's still difficult, but it's helping, and they're a great resource for you. Even if it's a slow process, they've been a great resource for them. And they felt like both felt like their communities were very supportive of it. And that was basically the gist of what I found out. I did put that. I know that we left it open. I did put it a while ago in my board report, and I'm just wanted to make sure I highlight it for you guys. That's basically what I wrote. So again, they were very supportive of it, both people, without any reservations.
Great, thank you.
I would like to request that we look at number 7 under personnel. It says that the board hereby approves employee number 551, school teacher. And that's the only time I think I've seen that. Is that intentional, or is that just something that needs to be taken out?
Well, we haven't been taking that language out. That was my mistake.
Okay, thank you.
We'll remove that for the regular session. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, so Mrs. Gould, would you move us through IMP for next meeting?
Sure. At the next meeting, I or someone else will move to vote on items 1 and 2 under instruction and programming. And item 1 is workshops with expenses for 3 teachers for multiple teachers in Riverview district. Is that just district-wide in Lakeview? And also for student teachers for the 2021 school year, for students who would be coming to observe from William Patterson, Caldwell, and Fairleigh Dickinson.
Thank you. Any questions or comments about
Did
that?
Mrs. Zeleny actually take 2 teacher college things online, or is her name down there twice by accident?
One was for reading and one was for writing. She took 2.
Okay,
and those
thank
were
you.
retroactive just because they were on a wait list. But because it was virtual this summer, they pulled a lot more people in at the last minute. And that got missed as far as the original approval, which was back in March, I think.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And is Amy Rossi she's a
literacy coach, so she works for the district, all
Gotcha.
schools.
That's how I understood it, but thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Mr. Capella, would you mind moving us through the policy revisions we'll be voting on at next meeting?
Certainly. At the next meeting, we will be reviewing for second reading and adoption policies and regulations listed here. We have remote public board meetings during a declared emergency, administrative employment contracts, restart and recovery plan, remote learning options for families, restart and recovery plan, full-time remote instruction, athletic competition, emergency procedures for sports and other athletic activities, seizure plan, cooperative purchasing, electronic funds transfer and claimant certification, school district security, property inventory, use of school facilities, emergency and crisis situations, procurement procedures for school nutrition programs. And these will all be for second reading and adoption at our next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Capella. Does anybody have any questions or comments about these policies? Okay. There is nothing as of yet under finance for next meeting. Mr. Cass, would you mind moving us through operations for next meeting?
Sure. At the next meeting, I will ask the board to approve under transportation a contract with the Hunterton Educational Service Commission to assist with additional routes as needed for the 2020-2021 school year at a per diem rate of $423.
Mrs. Wagner, can we ask Mr. Cass, how does he vote under finance on the action item?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Does anybody have any questions or comments about that for the next meeting?
Just for clarification, this is if we need routes on a per diem basis, just because we already have several routes with Hunterton Education Services Commission, I believe.
This past month in December, we were short staff in the transportation, so we needed additional drivers. So we did contact Huntington, and they were able to provide a bus and a driver for that specific. We used them for 2 days. So we will be approving them going forward for emergency situations. If we are short staffed, they should be able to give us a bus and a driver for that particular day on a per diem basis instead of an annual contract.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, we're going to move on to good of the cause, including committee reports, correspondence, and discussion items. Does anybody have anything they wanted to discuss tonight?
This is James. Just wanted to make sure that all board members are still has the same mindset with regards to the budget and trying to provide taxpayer relief. Since we do have a finance committee meeting upcoming, I'm going to proceed. I'm going to stay the course and proceed how we last discussed during our last board meeting, unless there's any board members that sort of change their position on how they felt about taxpayer relief.
And just to recap, James, so the committee is going to discuss what those cuts would look like if we were to cut the budget at different intervals and then report back to the full board? Is that what we discussed?
That's correct. That's correct. So long as the district it doesn't sacrifice too much, right? I mean, if it makes sense to, but of course, if it doesn't, then we'll vote as a board. But yeah, I'm going to continue with that mindset to see what it would look like if we could provide some sort of taxpayer relief package or something like that. I don't know how else to word it. So
I still feel much the same way. I would like to see what the numbers look like at least.
great. Thank you, Dave.
I wanted to discuss with the board about, and I don't know exactly where this would fall in with our rules and regulations, but about changing the committee organization structure so that typically we vote at this meeting or the following meeting for our committee organization. So we might have all shuffled around, but I think it might be easier if we go, instead of with the calendar year, if we changed our committee structure to the school year, so that we would, in July, we would reorganize committees. And in the new year, we didn't have any new board members this year who were voted in, but they would just fill in where the person they're replacing was until the end of the year, so that all the board members who are remaining during the calendar change would stay in the same committee. Like finance is deep into the budget at this point. I think it would be unfair to have those members change if they needed to. So I wanted to hear your thoughts about that.
So Laura, and I know you and I had a little bit of this conversation. One of the things that I always found challenging, especially when I was a new board member, was if you're thrown into, say, a committee like finance in January, right in the middle of when everything gets going. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's one of those things that you kind of hit your head and say, why didn't we do this sooner? I think it makes a lot of sense to match up the committee assignments with the with the school year as opposed to the calendar year. I'm not actually sure, I guess because of the reorg and I guess because of when the elections were changed, but I imagine, and maybe Damaris, Steve, you could help us with this. When the elections were in April, I guess then the committee assignments happened after the election and were a little more aligned with the school year. Is that true, or?
That is true. When the election was in April, the organization meeting was held in May, and for the new year.
And would boards typically reorganize their committees at that time, or they held off till the end of this?
They were approved during the organization meeting in May to start in July. That's with the April board meeting. Yeah. We do have a November election, so it is a little different, but nevertheless, it doesn't change. If you guys want to switch it, we still need to approve it at the beginning of the school year because we do need to send that information to the county.
So Damaris, is it fair to say that much like some of the other things that we approve, we could approve it at the reorg meeting or the meeting following it with the current assignments, and then in one of the June meetings, look at potentially moving committee assignments at that point?
Absolutely. You can keep it the same and then reapprove it again in June for the July meeting.
And do we have to change any regulations or policies in order to do that?
No, not necessarily. The county do need the information for information purposes, but it's not in the policy. As long as we board approve the committee at some point.
Would we have to send assuming, I mean, eventually the committees will change, and if we go forward with this, they would change in June. Would we have to then send another notification to the county that we've changed our committee setup at that point?
No, the notification will be sent again on the next calendar year with the current sitting members for those committee. Once a year, we'll send the information in with the sitting
Thank you.
committee members.
This is James. I'll chime in. I think that's a great idea, especially considering the examples that you gave with the Finance Committee. It also seems like it makes sense for the IMP committees as well. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. As long as there's no statutory policy or regulatory reason not to change, I think it would probably help. The only issue that might be, the only thing that might raise problems is that's occasionally we're doing negotiations at that. We're hot and heavy with negotiations at that point, but we only really do negotiations 2 out of every 3 years at this point, right?
Negotiations, right. I mean, every 3 years. Right now, we're on a 3-year cycle with all of them, and we can keep those committees. I mean, they don't necessarily have to change, regardless of anything else that the president would change at that time. That committee could just stay fixed.
Yeah, from my perspective, Laura, I think it makes a lot of sense. The only, just trying to think of problems that could be down the road. The only thing I could think of is that if you get a president that comes in January that has a different feeling on it and wants to do something different, then that could be a little bit of a challenge. But I, in my time on the board and the foreseeable future, I don't see that as an issue, but just trying to think of outside the box, a different sitting board that could be a problem where the president wants a different, and they have the right at any point, really, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, Damaris, but at any point, a president could change all the committees. Doesn't happen. In fact, I think since I've been on the board, Dino, keep me honest here, at one point, we talked about doing different committees for 6-month swings instead of a year swing. So I think there's been different philosophies and ways to look at it, but I think it makes a lot of logical sense considering the flow of our year on the board and what the committees do. So I'm in agreement with it.
I mean, Mike does make a good point.
I reviewed our policy, and our policy does not require any vote at all. Actually, the president just appoints the committees, and it is for a 1-year term. So I guess, Mike, what you're saying, that I guess that could come into play if the new president wanted to revamp it, then the board would have to change the 1 year, because the only stipulation, there's 2 stipulations. One is that the president appoints, and the second one is that it's for a 1-year term, and it also defines what the committees are. Those are the rules. So other than that, if the board wanted to take a look at that policy and make a change, I'd have to check to see if there's any kind of law that says you can't do that. But I don't really see it as an issue, because it really is something that the president decides on their own.
I mean, I guess the only complicating factor, and Mike touched on it, is that if you have, I mean, this year it's easy, right? Because Laura, you continuing. But if we were switching, person who was on a committee, typically the president doesn't sit on the committees. So that could be a bit of an issue. The new president would kind of maybe have to stay on the committee to keep the structure the same for the year. Maybe that's something we should talk about a little bit. That's an interesting wrinkle.
With the April election, that worked because the board president got elected at the same time of the committee. So it did work with the April election. With the November election, it's a little different. That's why we appoint the committee at the beginning of the year during the organization meeting for 1-year term. So it is something to think about before making any changes. The idea sounds great, but it might present in the future issues for prospective board members.
So not that I want to kick the can down the road and pass this problem on to future board members, but if we did go ahead and do this year, we would not need to, if I'm understanding correctly, change any policies or procedures, and then it can be revisited again in January of 2022. Is that right?
The policy doesn't really, it only specifies that the president selects and that it's for a 1-year term.
So,
Would it
Steve,
matter
if that's
we-
the case,
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say real quick, if that's the case, Steve, that it's got to be that the policy says a 1-year term. If Laura appointed in January, I don't know if I'm splitting hairs here, appointed in January for a 1-year term, would she reappoint in July 1st for a 1-year term again? In other words, like how do we bridge the gap for the next 6 months to get to kind of where we are? I think we may have to change the policy to be able to bridge that gap, but maybe I'm wrong here.
I was actually going to say something fairly similar, Mike. I would think that, okay, it's for a 1-year term, but if we reappoint on July 1st, that's effectively terminating the previous term early, and it's basically still doing it for a 1-year term. I don't think that's a legal issue, but we might want to inquire. And I think I cut you off, Steve. I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. I'll run it by the attorney, see if that language needs to be changed. Maybe you can say that the president has the authority to. I can see how a president can't appoint for longer than a year because the president's only the president for a year. So let me say, because it's an interesting thing that came up due to the fact that the election changed. Really, that's the whole reason why we're talking about it. So let me see what he says, if there's anything major with that.
Would it be possible to have it just brought up twice a year and just have it be a 6-month thing where that, the plan would be, we expect, to keep everybody on it for a year, but if it was a new president came in, then you'd shuffle around and we would just look at the committees every 6 months and either say, yeah, keep it, or we need to make a change. Would that be possible? Or I guess it'd just be policy.
The policy might need to be revised because the policy does state 1 year.
Maybe it's as simple as it changes up to a year. Maybe that'll fly. See what they say.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because I think what Steve is saying is that Laura couldn't reappoint on July 1st because her term as president expires December 31st, and she can't appoint a committee going into whoever is going to be president in 2022. So it may be really interesting because the president's term and the committees on how they appoint. I think logistically, if we could make it work, it makes a lot of sense. But I'm not sure. Yeah, it'd be interesting for kind of maybe Strauss Esme can give us some guidance on that. I'm not sure.
How about this? Instead of doing it for a 6-month term, for a year term, we just appoint committees twice a year for a 6-month term, and basically reappoint in July. And in July, we make the switches, and then whoever's the incoming president, if that person feels they need to switch up, they can do it then, and just change the policy so it's a 6-month term.
The only problem with doing that is that I think the intent makes sense. If it's written like that, you could have somebody come in and literally change the committees every 6 months, which I know since I've been on the board, we did it once, and you get no flow. You don't get into the rhythm of really being in the committee if you're in there for 6 months and then you're changing over to another committee. So I agree, Dave, that may make sense trying to get to the heart of it, but I wouldn't want somebody to misinterpret the way it's read to changing, literally swapping everything every 6 months, because that was tough to bear on the committees, I think.
So, Steve, it sounds like most of us are of the opinion of if we can do it, and maybe there's a policy revision that's needed, maybe there's not, but you'll look into it and get back to us of what, if we wanted to do it, what we would need to do.
That's correct. We'll work on it. We'll get back to you guys ASAP.
Yeah, but let me chip in a comment here. You serve on a committee for 12 months, whether it's from July to the end of June or January to the end of the year. I'm trying to get a grip on how does this improve the committee operations and the operating efficiency of the committees. To me, I'm on a committee for 12 months. What's going to get better?
Yeah, Don, I think, and I don't want to step on Laura's toes here, but I think part of it is just the flow of the committee, right? In other words, instruction and program typically is working on a school year calendar. So that makes sense from a flow perspective. And the budget cycle, like Dino mentioned, imagine a new committee member jumping into finance. We haven't had turnover on the board, right? But if you have turnover and you have new board members come in, and if somebody's on finance that is not going to continue on with the board, and you bring somebody new into that committee in January, I think that's a lot harder to get up to speed on than it is if you start in July, just because of the budget cycle. So I think it's just a matter of the way the calendar, our flow between budget and instruction and program, in my opinion, seem to match up a little bit better with a July to June calendar flow. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I first joined the board, it's an adjustment getting up to speed on just about everything, including in the committee. So it's like, baptism under fire. So I had an extensive meeting with Michael Bertram with this big notebook going over all the various nuances of the board and everything. So, you're right. We haven't had a lot of turnover. I just don't see it as maybe for an INP, it might be taken a look at. But the 6 months, shortening the committee tenure to 6 months or even less, very, very disruptive, because some of these things we work on, especially on, finance and building and grounds, when you get into some of the major projects we've been doing, some of those are discussed for 3 to 5 years before they come to fruition. The value of field is probably the most recent one. We've been talking about that for a long, long time. So sooner or later, somebody's going to have to get up to speed when they join the committee. And we do discuss a lot, anything major from finance, building, or grounds eventually does get discussed in there and out of the meeting before we vote on it.
Okay, so we'll just kind of keep this under discussion items for next meeting, and we'll see what Steve comes back with, and I'm sure we'll be discussing it again. And for now, it won't be till the next meeting that I would even make appointments for the committee. So that will work out. Under the board meeting highlights, I do feel like I glossed over it a little bit, and our thanks to Damaris, but I think that our audit with no recommendations would be one of the highlights of this meeting.
I agree.
Anything else you want to highlight for this meeting? I know we didn't vote on much.
How about the new re-elected board members and the new and presidents and vice presidents?
The new board members and the new or old officers. I know that a lot of us, I guess I should ask, who is going to committee meetings and if they're being held right now? I know that PTA is still going on. What about the other committees?
The green team has been all virtual since March.
But they're still meeting, Dave, and making plans and doing work.
We were fortunate that they were able to get they were able to get most of the legwork for the silver certification done before everything fell apart, and we were able to do the rest of it electronically. So there's very little in-person stuff going on. Normally they have between 4 and 6 events in town every year, and those meetings have been severely curtailed and changed to suit the current situation.
Thank you.
Yeah, Laura, the foundation has met a combination of virtual and in person. They had one in-person meeting. I think it was late summer, maybe early fall, but that was the only one they've had. But they've done virtual also.
Thank you.
For something we might want to at least publicize, rather maybe not a highlight, but we approved next year's school calendar. There was a question on the Riverview page about that just today.
Yes, the calendar is always a hot topic. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if that qualifies as a highlight, but I think we need to push it out.
Agreed. Along with the new half day that's coming. Okay, great. So, is there anything else anybody wanted to discuss here? If not, we are going to move. It is 8:15. We are going to open for public comments. If you have a comment or question for the board, please just type it in the chat and you will be called upon. And I'm seeing the same numbers, so I am guessing that we are still without new members of the public.
That's correct.
So, thank you, Cindy. So it is 8:15 and I'm going to close public comments. We do have a need for an executive session. So if we could get a motion to move to executive.
I move to convene an executive session in accordance with Section 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of this closed session will be to discuss legal issues. Minutes of this session will be made available to the public, and the need for confidentiality no longer exists.
Second.
I'll second. It's Mike.
Don't hang up yet, anybody. I know you guys like to get off really quick. Just give me a second. Once you guys move into executive, we're going to switch to the other link that I sent you in the calendar for the executive session. And then we're going to come back to this link to close the meeting and probably vote on one thing. Cindy, we'll need you back on that. So I will text you when it's time to get back on that, on the original one.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so for any members of the public who are either present or going to be watching this on YouTube at a later date, we're going to pause the video at this point, move into executive session, and then come back to have any votes and close the meeting. So I think Mr. Luer moved and Mr. Kim second is what I heard. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Very, very important that you guys all log out of this one. Please make sure. I'm going to wait to make sure there's nobody on this one and that you're back on the other one. It's going to be an executive private session. So
Is Mr. Cass in?
Yeah, I'm on.
Perfect. I'm going to roll call again. Mr. Kim,
Here.
Mr. Cass,
Here.
Mr. Capello,
Here.
Mr. Anderson,
Here.
Mr. Luer,
Present.
Mrs. Gould,
Here.
Mrs. Wagner.
Here.
Mrs. Wagner, do you want to assign somebody to make the motion to appoint Mr. Clearly Jacoby of Freddie Jacob LLC as board attorney for the new school year?
Yeah, can somebody move that as Damaris stated?
Sure. I moved the original appointments. I can move this one. If there are no objections, I move that the board appoint Cleary Jacoby Alfieri Jacobs LLC as board attorney for 2021 These services are exempt from public advertising for bids under the New Jersey statute annotated 18A, 18A-3.
I'll second.
Second.
Was that Mr. Cass?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So if anybody feels at all uncomfortable, if they want to hold off this vote and table it till the next meeting, that's absolutely fine. So I just wanted to have some discussion before we went ahead and did roll call.
I don't see a need to postpone.
I'm good.
I'm ready to proceed.
Okay. Let's do roll call then, Damaris. Thanks, everybody.
Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Lure?
Yes.
Mrs. Gould?
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have no further business, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Wow.
Second.
I'm sorry, I missed the first one.
So did I.
It was me.
Mr. Cass
That's a Mr. Capello, but
and Mr. Capello.
Oh, no.
No.
I wasn't involved in any of that. I didn't.
Oh.
I was just laughing in the background.
That was a race.
I seconded. I don't know if I don't know whether it was
Mr.
James or
We'll take
John
Mr.
that got there in first.
So Mr. Cass and Mr. Lure.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we're
Aye.
adjourned at 8:47, Damaris.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Happy New Year.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thanks.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.